You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. You're listening to the Barbell Logic Podcast. This is Matt Reynolds. I'm here. I invited my little brother on, Chris, again. And we wanted to talk a little bit today in this principle series about staying healthy during quarantine. At this point, really, most of us are in isolation. Those of you guys that heard my story on Thursday know that I tested positive for COVID-19. Actually, just a few hours after we recorded that podcast, my wife's test came back positive. So she's positive as well. And oddly enough, almost completely asymptomatic, not sick at all. And my kiddos seem to be negative. So how are you guys doing in isolation there outside of Boston?
Yeah, I mean, we are doing pretty well. So we pulled our kids out of school one day before the schools actually shut down. And part of that was I was just sort of doing the math.
A couple weeks
and
now,
figuring
somewhere in there, right?
Yeah, it's actually been one full week. So they closed the schools on Friday. That was the first day the kids wouldn't be going back. We pulled our kids out decided Wednesday night. Thursday they didn't go to school. And since then, we've just been hunkered down here at the house. We have literally not left the house, like, at all.
Sure. Yeah, us either, obviously. It's kind of interesting because for us, we are sort of what most people's lives look like right now in isolation or quarantine is sort of the way we live life every day. The difference that you have is that your kids typically go to school. And of course, the difference for us is that I'm homesick with the actual coronavirus. So it's been so there's some changes for everybody. I think if I were healthy, and I certainly have continued to take a turn for the better the last few days, so I feel quite a bit better. Then things would be a little more normal around here. They just don't feel normal. And some of that is just, my kids don't have it. So my kids are now shut up in their room. My wife laughed at me when the health department called and she tested positive. She was like, "You got the biggest smile on your face." I was like, "I get to move back to my bed." And I went and gave my wife a hug because I hadn't seen her in like a week. And, it wasn't good news for her, but I have a COVID friend now that I can suffer with. So, yeah. But we know that almost everybody on some level is, and probably entirely quarantined at this point. And if you're not yet, you will be soon. You probably should be, whether anybody has demanded you to be yet. And I think we just wanted to talk a little bit about what life looks like while in quarantine and sort of stuck in your house, and how to be healthy and not how to necessarily be healthy and avoid the disease, which is certainly something I think that's on everybody's mind and forefront, but really how to be emotionally and mentally healthy in the midst of the chaos. Most families aren't used to being at home all the time together. So what are your days looking like right now?
Yeah, so we've done a couple things. I mean, we've done a pretty decent job of planning forward. So the first thing that we noticed, or that we knew was probably going to happen, was the tendency of every human being right now is to stare at their phones or TVs and eat junk food, like laying on the couch, trying to soak up every bit of information on what's happening, right? So sure. It's just kind of freak out mode. And that's harder to do whenever you have your kids home and you're supposed to be schooling them as best you can, which is new for us. And so one thing that we knew we couldn't do was just sit around and stare at our phones and see what was going on, try to keep track of the numbers and read all the newest headlines and all of that. However, at the same time, not doing that at all would both feel slightly irresponsible, because as the parent of 3 children, we need to know what's going on. Sure. And make sure that we can sort of stay in the loop. So what we've done is we've actually this is kind of funny, we scheduled time to freak out. So every day we give ourselves a little time in the morning, a little time in the evening after the kids go down, and there's a little time in the afternoon after lunch as well that we'll just sort of scan the headlines and read things. And Jenny and I will talk back and forth about things we've discovered or found or read or whatever. And we call that our worry time. So we just sit there and worry because it feels like you need to. But doing it all day And many of the behaviors that can come along with that worry, or to help people cope with the worry, is where you can really get into some trouble with your own health. And one thing you really don't need right now, anybody, is to be less healthy going into what is probably going to be the beginning of a start to a large rise in the pandemic. You don't want to be less healthy. So
Sure.
working on trying to make sure that we're both mentally prepared for that, and also that our bodies are in good shape, is a good idea.
Yeah. So for us, we and of course it's been different with us being sick, but this is more about how we live life almost on a daily basis anyway. Is we live on a schedule, similar to what you just said. I mean, we get up at the same time every day, and we do the work we're supposed to do. The girls are doing web-based classrooms right now, so even though we homeschool, they're kind of part of a group that does things like science experiments and public speaking and stuff that's harder to do at home by yourself. So they're doing that today or the last couple of days, and that's been important for them. And then for us, it's just an issue of we've stayed away from fast food. We've stayed away from the most part from DoorDash and delivery services like that. And even though those services are certainly can be extremely beneficial during this time, like home cooked meals are good for us right now, and they provide some sort of solidarity for the family as well. And so just being on that schedule and doing the same thing that you guys have done, we've got our times to watch Netflix and veg, and we've got our times to like read Twitter and read all the news stories and freak out a little bit. But for the most part, it's kind of life as normal for us here, and that makes it feel good to me. I'll tell you one thing that's we're going to do actually here in about an hour is we're just going to do family chore time and work through the house and clean the house. It gets messier faster when everybody's home, and we've got a housekeeper who actually is sick herself, not actually with COVID. They thought that she might, and but she's kind of home ill, and of course we're in quarantine, so we can't have a housekeeper come over anyway. And so, making sure that the house is clean. And then the other thing is it's we're going into spring, and so like yesterday we opened up all the windows, we opened up all our shades are kind of always up anyway. We rarely have the window treatments in front of our window, and just got fresh air. And again, it's not really about the old wives' tale of does the fresh air actually make you healthier. It's more about the mental sort of thing it does. To breathe kind of fresh spring air just feels better and makes you feel like it's healthier. And especially when, for us, we've been in sort of sick quarantine for the last week or so. There's something about having the house clean and it smells clean, and there's like the windows are open and there's fresh air, and like it feels better that way. And so we've really focused on those things. I know for you as well, you guys have done a bunch of family workouts. So you're a block client. I coach you, but lately in your videos, as you submit them to me, like your kiddos are all in the videos. They're doing their body weight workouts. Your wife's doing the same thing. And what kind of role has that played for you guys?
It's been super helpful. I mean, it's always true that if you can exercise, that you're going to feel better. I mean, there's just incredible amounts of data on this. You mentally are better off if you're working out. It is difficult to get started. I actually think if you've missed a few workouts due to the chaos that's happening, I think part of it is your brain is going, who does voluntary hardship when we're under involuntary hardship?
Yeah, sure.
And if you can get over that hump, really, honestly, just once, then the rest of it is fairly easy, and it'll come more naturally to do. But I mean, we've noticed, first of all, I mean, you got little kids in the house. Our kids are elementary school age, all three of them, and they have got to get energy out. And so our workouts, as long as we just, you got to give a little in terms of, you can't do your hardcore workout with the kids doing all the things that you're doing, but what you can do is have them doing something while you're doing the things you're doing. And I'm fortunate that I've got a gym in the basement. Some people don't, but if you're doing body weight stuff, your kids can do that kind of thing with you, and you can turn it into a family event.
Yeah. One of the things for us that was been very important, I mentioned this on the podcast Thursday, was that we want to be able to provide that support and value to our clients in general. So we know we have a lot of clients that have been displaced. They can't work, they don't have a home gym, but that doesn't mean that they can't exercise. And so a lot of times in our sort of niche of the strength and conditioning community, we kind of poop on exercise, which it's about like, well, if you can't train, it's worthless. And that's not true at all. We've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast before, is that there's real value in exercising when training is unavailable. And so exercise all the time for the sake of exercise and never training when you should be training, that's not okay. But when you don't have a gym available, to be able to get in and continue with the habit of exercising, doing the body weight work, it's amazing how much it will help you, certainly mentally and emotionally, just the way you feel, but also I think it will really slow the detraining effect down for people who don't have access to barbells, to be able to go in and still do the air squats and the push-ups and the sit-ups and the jump squats and the, and whatever. And if they've got a kettlebell or a dumbbell or some bands, like, we can make those things work as best as we can. And so that seems to be a big help. And then I saw that you guys pulled the trigger on a trampoline this past week.
Yeah. I mean, like, the thing was, we were going to have to do something because we've got a house and a yard. I know I was thinking about what this would feel like to people who live in an apartment, or if they're, in a condo or something and
Sure.
they don't have a yard. Man, that would be tough. I'm like you, we keep our windows, the shades pulled up on the windows. And if it's a nice day, we open up the windows, and it just feels like, okay, we're not quite so contained when it feels like that. But we went ahead and bought a trampoline so that the kids could jump around on the trampoline and burn energy that way. And I've been getting on the trampoline, which
they're fun, man. They're a blast.
They are fun. Yeah. And I mean, there's some joints and ligaments and muscles and stuff that I don't normally use from in the sort of jumping and chaos motions that I've been doing.
Yeah. And
that's all fun. But yeah, I mean, it's another example of a way that I'm just trying to stay active and keep my mind off of, the chaos that's ensuing out in the outside world.
Yeah. And then Rachel and I, we actually went for a walk yesterday it's really the first physical thing I've done in about 2 weeks since being sick. Is I went for a walk around the neighborhood. I'm not around anybody. And if there were people coming on the same side of the road, we just crossed the road to the other side and walked on the sidewalk on the other side of the road. And that was more for their protection than our protection, obviously. We weren't going to put a sign on our head saying that we were COVID positive, but we just stayed away and just walked around the block a couple times, and it makes a big difference. And so, it's interesting that we are people who need to have some control in our life. And certainly you can swing the pendulum too far that direction, and you can get to the point where you have problems with like OCD, where you have to control everything. But if you had OCD right now, and I know there are people that do out there, that it's a bad time to have OCD, because we're sort of in the midst of the chaos. And so to have some control in the midst of the chaos, I think is actually calming for us. And if we don't take that too far. So for us, and I think you've said the same for you, is that requires us to live on a schedule and to sort of plan our food and meals, what we're going to eat every day, and not just kind of live by by the seat of our pants, and dedicate the times that we need to dedicate every day to work or school, to eating, to rest, to exercise and things that make us physically better. To reading for enjoyment, and not reading for freak out mode, but then also to schedule some of those times for the reading for the freak out mode. I've sort of lived on Twitter more than normal, because it's just interesting right now. It's more cutting edge than anything else, or reading the articles. And so Rachel and I do the same thing and share, but I think the big takeaway there is to put yourself on a schedule, maintain the same sleep schedule that you have normally maintained. We still do the early to bed, early to rise thing, and then get the exercise that you can, because you'll feel better. Do stuff with your family, and we've talked about this. We talked about this Thursday. Like, there are parts of this that are certainly not all bad. Getting to spend more time with your family, getting to eat home cooked meals, sort of getting back to the basics of what matters. There's something that's been. My pastor was texting me the other day, and he said, "How's isolation going?" And I was like, "Great, actually, I love it." He's like, he got real sick like 6 months ago with the flu, like real bad, where he had to isolate himself for about 8 days. He's like, "Yeah, I didn't miss people at all when I was isolated for 8 days." I was like, "I know, it's for being an extrovert like I am, it's actually been surprisingly nice to just kind of hunker down and get work done and focus on the things that really matter." And so I miss the exercise. After all that, obviously I've been so sick that I haven't been able to do much. And so taking the walk around the neighborhood yesterday was kind of my first step. We'll do that again today. And then I'm hoping to get back into the gym and doing some really light stuff here in the next few days. So,
yeah, when you think about the nutrition side of it, it's, it can be a little easier actually in this time. One, you're probably not going out to eat much, if any.
Sure.
You're probably not, you don't have access to some of those superfluous things. The other thing is, if, we've been a little concerned that I think everybody's this way, that you have enough groceries, that you have the right things, all those kinds of things. I don't know if that's a valid concern or not, to be honest, but measuring out what you eat can also help calm some of those fears and also fill that control void that you're looking to fill, because, one thing you can control is the food you put in your mouth. And so, it's a little easier to do that, I think, right now. But the other thing is, like you said, it's not all bad. Our kids, I don't know if anybody else has kids that waste things like milk, like pour them a big glass of milk and they're like pouring out half of it or all of it because they didn't drink any. We've been telling our kids, like, guys, we don't know if we're going to be able to consistently get milk. So, you're going to drink all your milk. We're going to pour you a little tiny bit. And it's funny, everybody in the family has gotten more into that routine. We may all end up behaving very much like our grandparents who lived through the Depression, but I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, it's wild. Have you talked to your kids much about the situation at hand?
Oh yeah, I mean we're on the extreme end probably of where most parents are in terms of just telling our kids the completely honest truth about everything. So when we pulled them out of school, we told them why, we told them what was going on. I actually make my oldest son Carter read one of my newspaper articles each day. The physical newspaper is still delivered, which seems bizarre because by the time it gets to my driveway, it's old news. But he reads an article, circles words he doesn't know. Of course, all the articles right now are about the same thing. So they know what's going on. They understand the concept, and we talk about it as a family quite a bit.
Yeah, we did the same thing. We've been doing the same thing. We had of course, because I've been in isolation, I haven't got to talk to my kids as much as I wanted to. Yesterday, we just kind of spread out to the four corners of the living room and just kind of talked through everything, like what it looks like and it kind of thought about like what the next 2 to 4 weeks might look like at our house, and talked about that. And then I'll tell you another fun thing that we've done that's maybe Carter could do this, your oldest could do this, but my kids are old enough to do this, is we've just been taking some time to do like a deep dive on whatever they want to do. So they tell me the subject that they're interested in. We're like, okay, because we want to facilitate this hunger of learning, right? What we did our very first episode on, that never-ending search for knowledge. And so if my kids are interested about whatever topic, okay, tell me the topic, and then what you're going to do is you're going to do the deep dive on Google and YouTube, and then we're going to come back and talk about it. You're going to tell me all the stuff you learned about whatever it is, and I don't care what it is right now. And so it's been interesting. And
we've done the same thing. We watched Charlotte's Web last night, and my kids were like, how do spiders make webs? Yep. And I was like, I can't tell you that I understand the entire dynamics of how spiders make webs. And so we dove super deep on how spiders make webs.
Yeah.
And it's a great opportunity to do some really strong deep dive. And the great thing is, from an educational standpoint for your kids, it can cross a lot of topical boundaries, because you can go over, biology and physics and math and all sorts of fascinating things that your kids wouldn't maybe necessarily have the same that wouldn't have the same perspective with in school. So it's
sure.
There are some good things that are in here for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and it teaches that love of learning for us. And so one of my favorite things about the way we homeschool that you never think about when you go to public school is that everything is so broken apart by subject, and you don't realize that like all of that. Wait a minute, Newton that you learn about in history has so much to do with math, it's ridiculous, right? And so there's like the history of math, but you never learn the history of math in public school. You learned math and you learned history. And so it's been interesting to do those deep dives on things that are quite interesting. Are you looking for your history of math book that you got back there?
I was actually. It's called The Story of Mathematics. And it was one of my favorite books, because I've always said if you could teach math to kids through history, it would anchor it better for them. For most of us, the way you're taught math is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then it gets lost by the time you take your next test. But if you learn, like, why did humans need to learn this thing, and what drove humans to need this thing over the course of the story of history, man, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's great. So whether you have kids or not, take some time, do a deep dive. Think about some of those things that are interesting to you, and do some research, because now you've got the time to do it. So I hope you guys stay healthy out there. Listen, make good choices, make smart choices. Like, again, remember, my wife just tested positive for coronavirus. She's had it for God knows how long. It is completely asymptomatic. And so for those of you out there who are like, well, I don't feel sick, I don't have fever, neither does she, but she has coronavirus. So take care of yourself, protect yourself, stay away from people as much as possible. That's just good, smart choices to make. You're making a wise decision for you and your family and for other people that you might put in harm's way, because you just don't know. And we'll hunker down and spend good time with your family, your spouse, good time in education and reading and doing those deep dives, and continue to do your training. Or if you don't have a home gym, get that exercise in. There's nothing wrong with it at all. And I think those are all pretty good words of wisdom. Cool. Thanks for being on the show again, man. We'll talk, I'm sure, again here in the next week or two. And we'll see you all tomorrow on Monday. See ya.